Hey everyone, real quick before we jump into today's video, as you can tell, I'm not in my normal studio. I'm actually traveling this entire week, but I will be back next week and everything will be back to normal. So bear with me until then. Obviously today we have to talk about a very grim story. An 18-year-old gunman in Uvalde, Texas went into a school, shot 19 students and 2 adults, killing 21 people total, reigniting the conversation around the need for gun control in America. So we just experienced in Uvalde, Texas, the second worst mass school shooting in US history. And before we talk at all about what conversation this has sparked or any of that, can we just take a moment? 19 innocent children and 2 innocent adults are dead. I cannot even fathom having a child in elementary school, I think it was the last week of school, and they get killed. 19 lives lost because of this man. So if you haven't heard the specifics, I'll give you a quick rundown of the events of that day. Before the day of, Salvador Ramos had purchased 2 rifles. He had just recently turned 18, and then Tuesday morning he had been messaging with someone on social media saying he wanted to shoot his grandmother, so that's what he did. Shot her in the head, but she actually got across with a gunshot wound to the head to a neighbor's house and notified the police. That 66-year-old grandmother of Salvador Ramos was still in critical condition at the hospital last I checked. He then went to Robb Elementary in his grandmother's truck, crashed the truck right outside of the school. A school police officer confronted him, but then Salvador shot the police officer. And then Salvador Ramos went into the school, and as people described who survived the event, it was non-stop shots. I mean, we're talking about 19 elementary school students killed because of this lunatic. And then if you can even imagine this, at 11:30 a.m., that's when this all started. It wasn't until after 1 p.m. that the police actually shot and killed Salvador Ramos. The end part, he barricaded himself in and was, interacting with the police, but a lot of time went by before the police even got him to that point. And just think about the minutes after minutes that pass, and you're barricaded in there just trying to protect your life, hearing people die, hearing countless gunshots. It's just unimaginable. And of course it did end, as I mentioned, with Salvador Ramos, the gunman, getting shot by police. So with an event like this, there's always going to be specifics that are kind of up in the air. That's why I don't want to dive into too much of the nitty-gritty that is kind of coming out and causing a lot of controversy. One of those discussions is around, did the police wait too long? It looks like they may have, and why were they waiting? Why didn't they go in immediately? So with a story like this, there's going to be a lot of misinformation flying around, and it just takes a while for the story to really be solidified and everyone to get their side in. So that's why I'm waiting to comment on any of the controversies that are coming out of this and just telling the facts that we absolutely know. So that's the actual tragedy. And as I mentioned, you just cannot overstate how devastating this is for the children, for the 2 adults who were killed, and for all of the families and friends of those people. But moving on to the expected conversation that comes out of terrible events like this, the pleading of so many for our government to do something to prevent future events like this. Now, as y'all know, this show is super new, so I actually haven't personally covered that many shootings of this nature, but just a few days ago, if you look back in my most recent videos, we were covering a shooting. But even just being someone who kept up with the news, and especially now that I'm talking about it, it really is a moment when something like this happens where you want to scream, please, people in power, do something. But most likely nothing's gonna get done. And that in, days, weeks, months, probably just weeks, a very similar event is gonna happen like this. I'm gonna talk about it, and I'm gonna be wanting the exact same action from our leaders, and we're not gonna get it. And so just to anyone who's super sensitive about anything related to guns being, our right to bear arms being infringed on, let's just clarify for you. The reason that people don't just focus on the individual in a situation like this, and they focus on the tool they use to enact this mass violence is, just that. They wouldn't have been able to enact this level of pain and suffering if it wasn't for such an effective killing tool, machine, like a gun. I mean, before the police could stop him, he killed 21 people. 21 people. Because he has a weapon that's designed for war or crazy hunting situations. And so I don't like when people say, oh my gosh, this mass shooting happened and now you're making it political by talking about gun control. No, it is absolutely reasonable to go, okay, clearly it's not just about this one individual, because there's tons of individuals that keep doing acts of violence like this. And the United States has a much higher level of events like this than other countries. And so there's something more that we should be doing than just going, oh my gosh, that person was deranged. Because clearly they were. Clearly Salvador Ramos is a lunatic, a disgusting human being. But there's something more, because we've seen a lot of lunatics, a lot of disgusting human beings who've done a lot of things like this, and they're able to do so much damage because of the easy access we have to killing machines like this. Now, people will say sometimes in good faith and sometimes to obfuscate from addressing the gun control thing, but either way it goes, they'll bring up mental health. And that's absolutely something we should be doing as well. We need to figure out in this country, what can we do to prevent people from being in such a dire mental health state that they do things like this. And there's honestly so many areas that we need to be investing time and energy that will have ripple effects and will prevent things like this from happening. But the most obvious way that we could at least, if not prevent, at least minimize the damage and carnage that these events cause is gun control. Now, I'll speak again to my very, very strong Second Amendment people. We're not talking about getting rid of the Second Amendment. We're not talking about completely ruining people's ability to get their hands on a firearm. That's not it. We're saying, or at least I'm saying, hey, how about at least you have to go through a couple hoops before you get something that could cause so much damage. The analogy I always like to make is when you turn 16, you don't just automatically have the ability to start driving on the roads, do you? No, you have to go through a pretty long process, going through all the driver's ed stuff, and then you go down, you get tested, make sure that you are responsible enough to drive a vehicle because it is dangerous. The whole reason we have the whole process to get a driver's license is because we understand that if people who don't have the mental capacity, aren't responsible enough, aren't trained enough to drive a car, they could cause harm. And so it makes so much sense in my head. It should be the same thing with a gun, right? We're not saying you can't have a gun, of course not. I'm saying you go through a process, you have to take a course just like you have to do with your driver's license, then you have to go take a test, and then you have to get tested at the actual skill. And then after you go through that, obviously background checks, all that type of stuff would be great. And then you can exercise your right. Just like how free speech is so important, we have to protect free speech, but there's some things you can't say. I can't directly threaten your life. I can't yell fire in a crowded theater. All of those things, because we understand there is a limitation to all of our rights, and especially in the case of the Second Amendment, there's small things we could do that would absolutely cut down on some of these mass tragedies. I mean, the mass shooter that we're talking about today in the Texas school shooting turned 18 and within 8 days was able to get 2 firearms, bunch of ammunition, everything you need to kill a bunch of people. Really? Would it really be infringing on your Second Amendment to, hey, maybe we make sure that you're someone who is responsible enough, is mentally sound enough to get 2 of those killing machines? I honestly don't know why people scream about the Second Amendment. We're not talking about getting rid of it. We're not talking about taking away your guns. We're just saying we should make sure that it's safe for you to have one. And so to everyone who screams about law-abiding citizens getting their rights taken away, no. If you're a law-abiding citizen, you're someone who can have a dangerous weapon like that, you'll still be able to have it. But we will prevent people like Salvador Ramos from getting his hands on such a dangerous tool. And going back to the close to hopeless feeling whenever we witness moments like this, Biden, of course, came out and called Congress to take action on gun control and everything we've heard before. Is it gonna get done? Probably not. And we're gonna watch time and time again as things happen like what we saw in Uvalde, Texas. And it's like we can't do anything. It's the most helpless feeling ever. And again, I have to remind you, this isn't just something that happens. This isn't just something that across the world, everyone experiences this. It is unique to America how bad this problem is. And something that I tweeted out was, Republicans have spent the last number of months proposing and passing legislation that is anti-LGBTQ, that demonizes LGBTQ people in the name of protecting the children. But then situations like this, they were the number one power force standing in the way of actually protecting the children. Whether it's ideological or it's because they get money from the NRA, whatever the reason is, the Republicans will not budge on this issue, won't do things that have 80% plus favorability in the country, like universal background checks. Republicans won't act on any of it. And they talk and talk and talk, protect the children, protect the children. That's why we have to explicitly call out the LGBTQ community in all of these bills. But then they're not actually protecting the children when it matters. Like when 19 of their lives are lost, innocent, I can't get over 19 innocent elementary school students dead. And one of the, of course, the person who's responsible is Salvador Ramos. Of course, it is on his hands. But the Republican Party's insistence that we don't take any action to prevent situations and events and tragedies like what we just saw happen absolutely contributes to more of them being able to happen. And then, of course, one of the things people were talking about was that Greg Abbott was scheduled to go to this big NRA event coming up in this weekend or next weekend, and just how, what are we doing? Come on, the people in power are watching kids die, and they have to know Salvador Ramos is not a super soldier who would have been able to go and just with, I don't know, a knife or a bat or something and do this type of damage. People understand, no matter what they say, that having an AR-15 or any other automatic or semi-automatic weapon like that absolutely allows you to do so much more damage and cause so much more suffering. So while I know it's hopeless, we have to keep pushing on our current politicians to do something, and then we have to work to get better politicians in power who will take action and prevent innocent lives from being lost in the future.